Ta-da! Hi guys, welcome back. Firstly, thanks to subscribers for checking in here today. It's much appreciated. If you're not subscribed, bottom right hand corner, the little Jeep symbol, if you just click on him, that'll sign you up for a subscription. If you turn on notifications, it'll bring you up when I bring out a new video. Today guys, we're going to look at then 5 simple, cheap and easy things you can do to your Jeep or your GPW to make it a little bit more original and just improve it that little bit extra. First things first then, as I mentioned in another video, I finally got hold of a drawer, a chest drawer, which is great, so I don't have to just put my tools willy-nilly, as you can see, everywhere, which is a huge pain. But also, as you can see as well, I had the left-hand cap there was the Joe's Motorpool one. That was the original one I had on there, but I did find on the internet, on eBay, quite cheap, an original IG1324D, which is the late war black cap for the distributor there with Autolite written on it. So I thought I had to go for that. That was only 35 bucks, you know, so in the grand scheme of things it's practically nothing. So yeah, I went for that and it looks really good, so I'm really pleased with that then. So let's get down to the 5 easy things you can do to the Jeep to make it that much more original and better. So guys, the first thing we can do then, which is really obvious when you look at a Jeep and when I look at a Jeep, is whether the bolt heads are correct, okay? So you'll all be familiar with, in the left there, we can see a Ford marked bolt. But on the late war Jeeps, we know that they used a mixture of Ford marked and unmarked, like that one in the corner there, and the one here. Now the unmarked late war Ford ones have a circle in them. Can you see hidden away in the paint there on the top one is a circle. Now if you've got bolts like that with a circle in them and unmarked, do not rip those off your Jeep and throw them in the bin and put on reproduction Ford ones, okay? Those are the original late war type bolts and they're very rare. They're much more rare than the Ford marked ones. You can find Ford ones on eBay all the time, but you'll never find the correct late war. Let's have a look. Can we see the circles? Yeah, can you see the circle on that one in the centre? It's just a manufacturing mark, but those are original Ford late war bolts, and if you've got those, they're very, very rare, so do not throw those away. If you do want to throw them away, send them to me because I need a couple, please, so that's great. But if you've fitted, you can't find the Ford bolts, or you can't find the original late war bolts, put on modern bolts. Now that's okay, but the problem with that is you well know that what we have is we've got Ford on the left, obviously, with the head markings, but on the right we've got modern head markings, okay? And those stand out like a sore thumb, okay? So the best thing to do with those is to get your angle grinder out with a sanding disc and sand those markings off, because there's nothing, not worse, but it's very obvious as soon as you come up to a Jeep and you have a look at it and you have a look at the body handles and things like that, and you can see the post-war manufacturing and tensile markings. They're just really obvious and they don't look very good at all. It looks like you've been down to the Home Depot and just picked up some house bolts and stuck them on there. So the first, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but I reckon get out a sanding disc and sand off those marks, and then it'll just look like you've got plain bolts on there. It's better than nothing, and it looks a lot better than the modern markings on them. So that's top tip number 1, and that's a free tip, that one. Tip number 2, guys, and just to add, I should say, be very careful when sanding off bolt head markings, of course, because remember, on the Jeep there are a number of bolt head markings which are original as well, like AA and EC marked bolts. So before you sand everything off, just make sure that it's not an original bolt with an original World War II head marking, which isn't a Ford marking, okay? So just bear that in mind. Have a look online first and make sure that you're sanding off the correct things, because you don't want to be sanding off AA marked bolts and things like that, because those are of course original, and that would be a bit of a problem. Next point we got, guys, then is hose clamps. Hose clamps, they're pretty obvious. When you open the Jeep straight up the engine bay, you can see them there. Now these hose clamps, the original World War II ones, are very good and they do work, but people, you know, they're not so easy to find, and people find that the Jubilee clip is a better design and does work better, okay? So often you'll find Jubilee clips on the hoses, but the Jubilee clip really stands out. It's really obvious. They're just not right, guys. But the World War II ones are fantastic if you can get hold of them. So you don't have to buy the original ones like these guys here in Cosmoline. You can get reproductions like these, and the reproductions are pretty good. They're not perfect. I don't think they work just quite as well as the original ones, but they're a very good, you know, these ones aren't leaking, so I think they're usable, guys. So that's a tip number 2, is swap over those Jubilee clips for some either reproduction ones, or if you can get hold of them, some original hose clamps, and it will make it look that much better. And then while we're talking about hoses as well, you don't have to get hold of these reproduction Ford marked ones and things like that, and the red stripe ones, you have to remember in the factory when they're putting hoses on, they wouldn't line up the stripes and what have you. So this hose here is a modern hose with modern markings, but they're hidden away underneath. So when you're using hoses and things like that, you can use modern stuff, just hide the markings underneath. You know, in the factory they wouldn't line Ford up and the GPW mark bits on the top, so you don't have to either. So just hide them away and you can use modern stuff with no issue whatsoever. So that's number 2. Next tip, guys, then is this one here. So this is number 3. This is a really straightforward and easy one to do, and it makes a difference between your Jeep looking okay and looking pretty damn good. So a tiny little thing like this is fitting the stencil or doing the stencil for your safety glass, okay? So in World War II, the Fords had this and the Willys had a slightly different one. You can get these stencils online on eBay and things like that, and from Ron at G503, and you can do that yourself. So what you get hold of then is a pot of that in the corner, Armour Etch, and that stuff etches the glass for you. Now you've got to be very careful with that. It is strong stuff and it will etch all of your glass. So when it comes to stenciling, make sure you have a practice, okay? Because you don't want to be getting this Armour Etch in areas where you don't want it, especially any sort of runs or dribbles, or when you're wiping it off or anything like that. If it goes on the glass, it'll mark it and then you have a big white mess on your lovely glass which you've taken ages to fit. So have a practice, make sure everything's masked up, and make sure you have plenty of water on hand so you can wash it away when you need to. And also have a look online. There are guides about it on how the stencil should be and the way round they should be. So I believe this is the correct way round. So it looks reverse from the inside on this one, and then the other one looks the correct way round when you're sitting in the passenger seat. So the Ford is the correct way round when you're looking at it, if it ever focuses on it, whereas the other one is the other way round. So make sure those are correct. That's correct for the Ford anyway, I believe. So that's top tip number 3 then, guys. Just simply etch your glass and it makes quite a difference. Tip number 4, guys, which I think makes a really big difference as well, is the ignition cabling, okay? So this is the original style ignition cabling, and until recently it wasn't so easy to get hold of this, but Joe's Motorpool have brought out an ignition cable kit for you, which makes it really straightforward, and it's nice and cheap too. So I think this kind of wire looks very different to the modern wire. It's kind of like a shellacky sort of look to it, with the little boots going on in there, and then the 90-degree bends here, and it looks really different to this sort of modern stuff. You can see there's, where have we got, modern markings on it, things like that. That boot's alright, but the other boots, they just don't look right when they're on there, and it makes a really big difference, and it's not expensive either. So if you swap over the modern ignition cabling for this quite cheap and original looking 90-degree ignition cabling with this lovely sort of shiny wire, you know, it just looks that much better, guys. So I think that's another great tip, that one, and not expensive as well. So that's tip number 4. Change over your ignition wiring from the modern stuff to the original style stuff. Right, guys, and then the last tip, tip number 5, is washers on Jeeps. Now on late GPWs there's quite a lot of interesting thing going on with star washers. You can see here on the fender you've got a lower big star washer, a flat washer, and then a smaller star washer, and then the bolt itself. So there's a number of different star washers used on the GPWs, and they make quite a difference about how it looks. This little detail, I think it's quite important. You can see it on the bond straps there, on the regulator, things like that. They were really important for grounding. So they do have a purpose. They're not just there for looks. They stop things rattling apart, and they also cut into the metal, and they're used for grounding, and they make quite a difference to how the Jeep looks. And even though they're just a small detail and not very expensive, I think they make a big difference. So that's quite a straightforward one to do there. The only issue with that, of course, is that you've got to research where they all go. I don't think I've got it correct everywhere. I've tried my best, and I think they're pretty accurate to how it should be, but there's probably a lot of disagreement about how star washers should be and where they should be. But if you try and get some in the correct place, it makes a big difference, and it doesn't cost that much. So have a look into that then. Just do some research online and have them try and find out where all those star washers go, and get hold of some as well, because guys are making reproductions again of those now. They were quite difficult to get hold of, but with the repros it's getting easier. So that's it, guys. That's 5 straightforward, easy, cheap things you can do just to quickly improve the look and the originality of your Jeep. Have you got any other tips which are easy and straightforward which you can do on the Jeep to make it look better? If so, let me know down in the comments below. But if you like that, guys, like it and subscribe. Thanks a lot. See you next time.